It's quite a nice day now. Any text is only a partial account of whatever it is, and there's no guarantee of a particular interpretation being right. But some will be more plausible than others. Those who place heavy emphasis on the text and may even treat it as infallible, what they don't realize is that they're actually indulging in a form of idolatry. Christians are often reluctant to talk about the Bible as fallible because it looks as though it's being disrespectful to a text. But Christianity doesn't actually primarily believe in a text. Christianity believes in a personal reality that is God. All religions tend to look to their past, and in some sense that's right, because the past is what has made them, and it's a tradition within which they live. But the more historical work you do in looking at a tradition, the more you see it is actually a tradition of change. One reason I find religion significant is because it tells me...
David, sorry, Cuthbert has come back.
Oh my God.
Come on, sit down. Who's a good boy? Right. Cuthbert, come on.
Come on. Let's
Right.
try.
Right. Look. My range of interests has always been very wide. And my tutors at Oxford were very keen that I do philosophy rather than theology. And it would have pleased my father more, because, in that stage he was still of the view that going into the church was a waste of time. So. In trying to explain why theology is important, I think it's relevant to look at a wider context. And that wider context would be, what is it to be human? I was born in a place called Galashiels of an English father and a Scottish mother. My father had lapsed from Christianity before I was born, but my mother was always devout. She always thought the best of people. It was only towards the end of his life that I appreciated my father. His portrait hung above my bed, and I always used to find him distant and rather frightening. But I think it was partly because, like a lot of people of his generation, he was unable to show emotion.
And here he is now, our guest, Mr. Jim Reeves. All around the water.
I used to quite like Jim Reeves. And as my father was dying, I just happened to be playing the song of his called Daddy Teach Me How to Pray. And my father entered the room. And burst into tears. He was seriously ill with cancer at that point, and he had in fact never taught me how to pray. prayer. It's one thing that contemporary people find difficult to understand. Why do we need to say all these nice things to God? Because He knows them already. And the answer is that's not what one's up to. One's acknowledging dependence on something greater than oneself. And that's would seem to me the heart of Christian practice, because you're then discovering the center lies not in you, but in others. The reason I think my father burst into tears at that point was he realized that prayer was important for me, but it was actually important for him because it said something about the possibility of a different kind of relationship. Quite a number of scientists and philosophers are reductionist. So they see everything as explicable in terms of one level of reality, material reality. I simply don't think that's true. Things like morality, art, and religion can't simply be explained in narrow scientific terms, are at this higher level. And I suppose one of the things I've tried to do is indicate the connections, particularly with the arts. Artists are concerned to move us to a different place. One thing about my interests generally is that they tend to be very Catholic. I've read across a very wide spectrum, both in types of art and specific artists. I mean, I like Graham Greene. George Mackay Brown, a 20th century Scottish poet. I'm still very fond of Wordsworth. I'm less fond of Milton now. Wyman, for example, in the States, writing about prayer. One of my favourite poems about prayer is by Carol Ann Duffy. In terms of music, I mean, Wagner is a very complex figure, but nonetheless he had a sense of something of the transcendent. I'd like Nick Cave, for example, and U2 would be another example. You haven't appreciated a work of art unless you see it as something other than yourself, and so not as simply reflecting what you already think, but saying something that's different. So the ultimate pool of that otherness is this reality that is God. But if that's the way we experience God, might it not actually be the same in the divine relationship to us? That God is letting us be other, because in turn that being values us. At the moment, particularly in Europe, Christianity is in decline, and part of the reason for that is the inability of the church to think, how is it now called to respond? On the whole, it's simply reacting to society rather than being creatively other. There's a marvelous verse in the book of James which says, if you draw near to God, God will draw near to you. Unless you're open, nothing interesting will happen. Unless you expose yourself to possibilities, you're never going to get beyond where you are. So, of course, exposing yourself means being exposed to hurt. Things will go wrong. But it also means exposing yourself to the reverse, that things will go right. And you'll not only meet God, but also meet people who can have a profound effect on you. We may view God as constantly interacting with his people throughout history, and in a way which takes their humanity and their conditionedness with maximum seriousness. While within Christianity the primary focus of reflection and interaction must remain with the Bible, it would be, on my view, a huge mistake to assume that any interaction thereafter is mediated through an unchanging text. Rather, the text becomes part of a living tradition that is constantly subject to change, and that includes change in the perceived content of the biblical narratives. New insights are generated as different social conditions open up new possibilities and perspectives. The greater part of divine revelation may still be ahead of us, not behind.